Welcome back to Blade Talk Tuesday. This is Jude. Thank you so much for joining me. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about the collection of knives that I regret selling. In the knife collecting community, we do a lot of buying, selling, trading of our knives. It's one way to build your collection. It's one way to evolve your collection. And I am no different than that. I have bought many knives in the past. I have sold many knives in the past. And I have traded knives for other knives. This is how my collection continually changes. This is also what often gives me content for my YouTube videos, is this constant revolution of knives. Now, while this can be very beneficial to your collection because it keeps things fresh, it keeps things interesting, and it still gives you that little bit of buyer's high as you collect new knives, there is a downside that comes along with it. Sometimes you let go of a knife, you sell it, you part with it, that later on you realize, man, I wish I had not sold that knife. And there are a few knives that come to mind, some of which you've never seen on this channel, others you've definitely seen often, but I don't want to focus too much on whether or not you've seen them because we're going to list them out right now. Now, this is in no particular order. I just kind of went through some of my old videos and I went through some of my old photos, picked out some knives that I'm like, man, I wish I hadn't sold that one. So we'll start with the Bhk Scout Platoon, or when I bought it, it was still the Pathfinder Scout. It had the little Pathfinder logo on it. I regret selling this one mainly because it was an iconic piece for me. I remember early on in my YouTube days watching channels like Prepared Mind 101 and Mantis Outdoors, and how those guys used to go out and use these knives. And Mantis Outdoors would always use his Pathfinder Scout to do pretty much everything. So when I finally got a hold of one, I was super excited. I felt like I was going to make it as a bushcrafter. I even got a special sheath made for it by Appalachian Custom Leather, and then I went and sold it. And I regret that. Not that I really use that knife often, but it was kind of a collector's piece for me. It was back when they were still being sold at Self-Reliance Outfitters, and I really did like that knife. It was lightweight enough to be used comfortably, and it was still large enough to handle a lot of tasks. And in the future, maybe I'll get another one, but it would never be the same as that original with the Pathfinder logo on it. So I regret that one. The next knife I regret selling is the Bark River Knives JX5. This was a beast of a knife. I only owned it for maybe a week, never showed it in any videos, kind of took it out in the backyard and tried to do a bow drill set with it, and I sold it. Just didn't see any use for it. It was enormous, giant, heavy blade. I know I'd never carry it into the woods or really use it on any backpacking trips either, but it was just a cool knife. It was kind of cool to have. It was like, you know, it was like a giant chopper knife, and I've never had a giant chopping knife, so I regret selling that one because I know that that's one that I will never buy again. If it wasn't in my collection now, I ain't gonna buy it, and it would have been cool to just say, yeah, I've got this giant knife. I mean, the blade was like, you know, 9 or 10 inches long. It was a big knife. Another Bark River knife I regret selling is the JX6. This is probably my favorite knives that ever came out of Prepared Mind 101. Very lightweight, very comfortable in the hand, super slicey, just very sleek looking. I've owned two in the past, and I've sold them both times. I don't know why. I think mainly because the handle just always felt real tiny for my hands, but it's still really nice to have, and it slices so well. The most recent one I picked up had black and white handles and was an LMAX steel, so it would have been a perfect like skinning or fishing knife. Once again, I sold it, and yeah, I might pick one of those up again in the future if I have the opportunity, because it's just a handy knife to have. Another one that I've had multiple times is the Ltright Genesis. I've sold it both times, mainly because it helped fund purchases in the future, but both times I regretted it, so I don't know why I did it twice. This is one of those knives that, you know, maybe the next time I purchase one, because I might purchase a third time, if I purchase it again, I get it in a saber grind, just to try that out instead. But it just is a big, heavy knife, and it's one of those that, you know, just like the JX5 or whatever that one was, I probably wouldn't use it a ton, but as like a one-tool option, oh yeah, I'd bring it. I'd bring that, you know, we're talking about perfect bushcraft systems. I'd probably bring that in lieu of an axe and just that and a saw and be just fine. So that's one of those knives that I do regret selling both times that I did. Another one is the Ltright Genesis. I've had a relationship with the Ltright Genesis for a number of years. It's the knife I brought through survival training. It's the one that saw me get all my certificates in that, and it just works. It's just one of those knives that I do believe that every bushcrafter should have in their collection. And I currently don't own one, and I wish I hadn't sold it. I don't know why I did. Again, it's just like one of those decisions that you make spur of the moment, like, hey, I'm not currently using this and I wanted to buy this other knife, so I'll just sell this one. And I regret it. And I might buy another one, who knows? Again, kind of depends on the situation and funds and all that kind of stuff. So the Genesis, every bushcrafter should have one, and I don't. So does that mean I'm not a bushcrafter right now? Those 5 knives are pretty much available. You know, I could purchase them again. And so, yeah, there's some regret in selling them, but in essence, if I really regretted it that much, I just buy them again. But these next 2 are pretty much impossible to get, and I sold them in a time when I thought they wouldn't be impossible to get, and I'm talking about black feather knives. You all know, or at least you should know, that I'm a big fan of Joe Honeycutt's work. I have several black feather knives, and I just love them. They're fantastic, great designs, great handles, great heat treat. Everything about them is great. If you get your hands on one, keep it and use it, because they're meant to be used. I sold a black feather Sigmora. Now, back up. Sigmora is Sigma 3 Survival School's signature knife. It's the smaller of the 2, but for a little while, Joe Honeycutt was making them for Sigma 3. And I sold the one that I had from him, and now they're impossible to get. Nobody's going to sell any on the used market because they're so great, and I wish I hadn't, because they're just a collector's piece. They're a great design, they're a great shape, they're a great handle profile, and they're made by a great maker. Everything about them is great. I sold it, regretted it, but there's no going back at this point. It's not like I can find it again. And along that same line, I sold my black feather Woodsman. And this is probably the knife of all knives that I regret selling the most of all, is the black feather Woodsman. This knife was, for me, one of the best bushcraft knives I think I've ever purchased. And I sold it because I wanted to buy his bush tool knife, because I wasn't a fan of the blade profile combined with the handle. I liked the blade profile, but I wasn't a huge fan of the handle. And that was because I wasn't really sure of how it should be held and how it needed to be used. I thought maybe I needed my hand closer to the blade. I was kind of immature at the time, and I bought it early on in my kind of bushcraft career. So I sold it to get the bush tool and regretted it almost instantly as I watched it depart from my home on the U.S. Postal Service truck. I shed a tear as I watched it disappear in the distance. But I sold that one, regretted it, and I guess to make up for it, I bought a bush tool. I have 2 of his black lures, and I've got a journey knife from him. Never going to sell any of those. I don't care what happens. They're permanent collections, but they still don't fill the void of no Woodsman knife. And I had an opportunity not too long ago to purchase one, but it was like almost $400. And I'm like, okay, I regret it, but I don't regret it that much. Like $400 worth? I don't think so. So what knives do you regret selling? I'm sure there's some in your collection that you've parted with that you're like, man, if I had just held on to that one a little bit longer, I probably would have kept it and loved it. But you said goodbye, and now there's no going back. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your opinions, and hear about your list. So thank you for watching, for sticking around for my little story, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.